Hello, and welcome to The Mind of a Therapist, a podcast where we interview psychotherapists and helping professionals what they are passionate about in order to provide you with messages of encouragement and hope. The Mind of a Therapist is sponsored by Psychological Counseling Services, PCS, Healing Hearts and Transforming Lives. Please look into our intensive program at pcsintensive.com. I am Dr. Marcus Earle, the Clinical Director of PCS. Each episode will be hosted by me or another PCS therapist. Please enjoy the following discussion.
Hi, I am Kira Arthur. I am a licensed associate counselor here at Psychological Counseling Services, and I'm so happy to introduce today our guest, Cathy Williams, founder of Intuitive Self, a movement and expressive arts therapy practice, an award-winning author, a community facilitator and trainer, and an embodiment practitioner. Welcome, Cathy.
Thanks for having me, Kira.
You are so welcome. I'm so happy to have you and learn more about you and your work and your practice.
Yay!
And so I just really want to dive on in, okay? Because I've done a lot of research about you and I'm really curious about your own healing journey. And so I'd love to know, was there a moment in your own healing journey when your body really knew something that maybe your mind hadn't quite connected with yet, or that moment that your body really kind of came online or alive for you, and what that felt like?
Oh, wow. I love the inquiry into the signals from our body because that is such a through line with my work. For me, it was a bit of the opposite, actually. I feel like I always had a really strong connection with my intuition. And so for me, my intuition is that inner compass that signals to me through the body, through, that gut sense when I feel like something's off or I feel that something isn't quite right. I've always been able to connect with my intuition from a really young age. But through different circumstances, through my response and different coping mechanisms with different experiences that I've had over my life, I did very well at learning how to cut off that connection and actually disconnect from that connection and not trust it how I once did. And this wasn't something that I did consciously. I wasn't aware of it at the time. It was, I imagine, something that, I got into this pattern or this habit of slowly denying that part of myself. So I worked for many years in community development overseas. I kept myself really busy and really in that overproductive do way that we are. And I found myself needing to do that because if I was to pause, if I was to stop, even if I was to take a night off, then I'd have this overwhelming sense of too many feelings and too much that I was trying really hard at the time to ignore and to keep myself distracted from. So what my experience was that I basically did this so well that I disconnected from myself and I got incredibly burnt out in the field of work that I was working in and kind of fell into a bit of a depressive state. And that's when I was invited to a women's circle of sorts. It was facilitated by a movement and expressive art therapist herself who had just come back from her Tamalpa training in California was founded by Anna and Daria Halprin. And in this women's circle, we were invited to really be present with what was current in our life. And instead of talking about it, instead of finding words for the expression of this, we were invited to move it through our bodies. And this inquiry, this way of being with self, was completely new to me. And I relished in it because I didn't, I spent a lot of time in my head and ruminating and distracting myself from that overthinking. So being able to just be present with the body and be silly and be loud and be expressive in that way was incredibly cathartic and incredibly fresh and new to me. And that's when I think I started to realize how much I had been living in my head and how much I had actually ignored those signals of my body. And it set me on this incredible pathway of being so enamored with this form of expression that I then went on to find mentors and study and become a student of this work, and realized that in my own way, I'd kept myself so busy and focused on supporting other that I had forgotten that deep connection with myself.
Yeah, it was a great distraction for you, right? To pay attention to the rest of the world, meanwhile feeling totally disconnected from kind of the neck down, as I like to say with my clients, that it's easy to live head up, right?
Yes.
And once we start making that connection again, we go, oh no, this is really living. And it sounds like that's really where that shift happened for you.
Yes. And I feel like it's so easy when we live in a Western society that really gives preference to the mind and gives preference to keeping yourself distracted and focusing on the external rather than the internal. That we can, we find different coping mechanisms to ignore that inner voice and to ignore those inner tensions.
Inner tensions. I appreciate that phrasing. And for those people who are listening who might not really be aware of what somatics are or an embodiment practice, how would you describe that to people who are maybe eager to feeling alive in their body but don't quite know what embodiment or somatics or intuitive connection, what all of that is? How would you describe that?
Yes, they can often be very new phrases for a lot of our community. The way that I describe it is somatic movement therapy is really the inclusion of somatic information in our assessment and our treatment when we're working with someone. So the philosophy is really putting the body, mind, and heart, we're working holistically together. So the body is really a doorway in to the present moment, to our history of what we've been through, what we've carried. It reflects our inner emotional landscape. And by checking in with the body, so we do something called the somatic check-in, where we're actually honoring the body and honoring our feelings and our experiences, we can really bring attention to how we're feeling, what our body is signaling to us, and we use movement and expression in different ways through movement and creative arts and breath to regulate ourselves, to be curious about these inner feelings. And in that way, this framework and this way of being holds that if we change our movement, this can lead to changes in our psyche. So the simplest way that I describe this to people is the feeling that we get when we might be quite lethargic, or we might have a lot of tension in our body. If you were to get up and walk around, have a little shake off, have a little brush down, that feeling of change, not necessarily for better or for worse, but there is change there. and we're shifting something. So it's really bringing the body into the room with us when we're getting self-reflective and wanting to be with ourselves with intention.
I appreciate the not for better, not for worse, right? There's sort of just gets to be this observation of state change that we get to be aware of and not kind of placing a judgment on that change again for better or for worse. It's just what is.
Yes,
And I think that that's an important part of that work too.
absolutely. And it's very invitational. It's led with curiosity, and it's not about looking a certain way, or people often get it confused with, dancing. So, it's all about dancing. And yes, it is very creative and it's very expressive, but it's not about being a dancer. And art therapy isn't about being an artist. It's rather finding new avenues to connect with yourself and to express and to give expression and to understand the signals of the body and what they're holding or what they're wanting to show you. So, the same way that we can be really stressed about something and how that can come through in the mind with ruminating or overthinking, that can come through in the way that we hold our body and the way that we show up in the world through our posture, through muscle tension, and just being aware of these different sensations and emotions that we're feeling and finding other ways to be with that.
I can't help but think of it from the lens of a counselor, right? And so for practitioners who are listening to this, what are some ways that therapists can support their clients to tune into these subtle signals without maybe risking safety, right? For maybe clients who have some body trauma in some way, shape, or form, how can therapists sort of support clients to get curious around those bodily cues in a safe way?
Yeah, beautiful. Safety is number one. Yeah, that trust and learning ways to gently presence our body in the space. So there are many different, I guess, entry points for people to start this process. And I guess the first two that I often begin with is finding that sacred pause. So just, we might have our clients come into a session and they've got, a full agenda. They've got a list of different things that they really want to talk about. But let's just find a pause. Let's presence our body on this chair, on this sofa. Maybe even bring in some hands, some self-touch, and just actually be like, oh, I'm in a body. I have a body. I'm here and now. And that self-touch it's really gentle because it is self to self, and they can, whether that's with their hands or whether that's with maybe a weighted blanket or something, a different texture that can bring in that comfort, we're able to ground in the present moment. And I feel like when we carve out time for a sacred pause, we're able to bring our full presence to this moment, our full presence to our breath. And yes, there might be a million things that we want to vomit out and talk about, but what is the feeling that we have? What has the most charge at the moment? And just taking a moment to actually check in and be like, the most present emotion is sadness, or I'm really feeling quite heavy here in my shoulders, and having that as an entry point for further inquiry. And then maybe different things will come out, but I think often we can have an idea of what the challenge is or what the problem is, but we often bypass the feeling in trying to express that or to work it out, and we're problem solving and going straight to fix it mode rather than being with and being curious about what's there. So with my work, and something that I always emphasize is that, the counselor, the facilitator, we hold the space and we hold that safe container, and we're able to observe and to bring mention to and to offer different processes to support our client. But the client is the one who sets the pace and brings the content. And if we bring in these small moments of pausing or inquiring, like bringing in a somatic check-in, where do you feel that in the body? How does that sit in the body now? What's the loudest part of your body? I think it does a lot of good to presence the body in the space and to bring us back down, so we're working with the whole self, not just up.
There's a slowness in the process. I heard you say, clients set the pace, and I've had a lot of clients come in and kind of do like what you said. They sit down, they've got their agenda, their to-do list, and they want to hit the ground running. And so sometimes there's a responsibility as a practitioner, right, to go, okay, let's just actually slow this down. And I'm really hearing that in your work too, that it's important to just slow down and pause, right, that intentional pause, and noticing, right, what actually is happening inside of me. I'm going to give myself this opportunity to actually check in that way, because most people in the world aren't pausing long enough to actually check in with bodily sensations. Only if it's bad, right, in big air quotes here, are they noticing when something bad's happening in their body.
Yes, one of the things I always ask in my trainings that I do is, when are you most aware of your body? And the answer that comes back is, oh, when I'm in pain, when it's not working the way that it used to or is supposed to. And I find that so funny that when we are functioning at our normal pace, we can check off all of the lists, and we can show up to work or show up to our responsibilities in life. But then when we, stub our toe, or when we've got some pain somewhere, that's when we pay attention to our body. So it's really encouraging a way of life where we are checking in with the body regularly, where we're having a dialogue with that self in that way. And my personal philosophy is that, we have so much wisdom and so many resources that are held in the body and the heart and the mind. And how do we get them to work together, in partnership together, rather than working against it or ignoring it? So this sacred pause and opportunity, as you said, to be with self and be with our feelings, means that, I really believe that our feelings are there to be felt. And I have, as I mentioned briefly before, I have a history of bypassing those feelings and ignoring those feelings. But it was in safe environments where I had that container held by someone else, and now held by the pillars of my practices, where I know I can go in, I can feel safe to feel my feelings for that dedicated amount of time, that intentional time, and see what's there, see what wants to be heard and felt and seen and moved and expressed, so that I'm not going straight to my mind trying to solve the problem or solve the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious with clients who have been told that their intuition shouldn't be listened to, or told that don't trust yourself, right? Whether it's through a traumatic experience, or maybe they were verbally told that you can't trust your own judgment or your own intuition. What's the process like of that reconnection, right? Reintegrating that safety within their own sense of self. I'm curious, what's that like?
This is so common. It's so common, and that finding some of the root causes of that initial disconnection and dissociation can look so different for so many of us. But when we start to initially feel safe enough in that therapeutic relationship, in that space together, where we can have techniques and tools where we can presence the body, we can know that we can come back to the breath, and we've got our different, I call them anchor points, that allow us to know that we can say no at any time and, stop the process, or know that we can take it more gently, or change the way that we're entering those spaces together. Then what tends to happen is we're finding what some of the original wounds are. And that could be an experience, as you said. It could be something that was verbally told to them. It could have been something that they experienced over a period of time through someone's actions. And the way that we learn again to feel safe or to rebuild that trust, I mean, it's hard to answer because it looks different for everyone, but for what I found is the most supportive is working with different timelines and making sure that we've got anchor points back to the now, and ways that we can be with the body in the present moment to feel safe as we explore these past experiences. And it's not necessarily through words. So we might be going into different visualizations. We might be exploring that through movement expression of a different part of the body. So often what I do with clients is, we'll start with a particular challenge or a particular theme. We'll presence that in the body where it might live in the body currently right now, or that might be visually represented on a body map. And then we get curious about that, what they feel comfortable entering into. And we find expression for that. So the expression for that can look different for everyone. That could be sounds, it could be words, it could be movement as if they were doing a dance. It could be different memories coming back. And we're dialoguing in that process. And they are sharing what they wish to share about what's there. And then depending on what rises, depending on what comes up, we're then able to enter that further or to debrief about that and feel into what feels true for them in this moment. And something that has been really important and supportive of that deep diving is making sure that they feel supported and integrated through that process, so that they can again come back to something that is supportive in this moment. So even though that might have been something, there might be something that they took on, part of their identity, something that was told to them, what is a way that we can reframe that now? What is a way that we can be with that information now? And it does mean that we are able to separate ourselves out from that past experience, but it also means that we're able to do things for ourselves in the now that changes our relationship to that and shifts that through the body and through techniques that use the body. And this is really important because when they leave that space with me, I always give home play. I always have, whether that is continuing with a particular symbol that's come through, or encouraging them to do that movement that gave them a different feeling, whether that was offering protection or offering comfort or offering release, for example. I often create different meditation audio files for them, which is allowing them to really anchor in that new reframe and have different reminders of things that they can do in the moment if they were to, for example, if they were to get flashbacks, or if that self-talk was to creep back in, what can they do in the moment to acknowledge that that's happened, but then almost instantaneously shift back into something that is supportive for them. So I feel like it's, this work can be playful, it can be light, but it can also be quite deep, and it can be quite transformative. And it really, I guess, the foundation of feeling safe enough to explore those things in the first place is where I like to support and resource my clients first and foremost, so that they feel the strength to go through and explore what's there, but then also be able to reframe it and come out with their own resources that come from that experience. So celebrating what they have and reminding them of those inner resources, and that they lived through that experience, but that experience or those comments from external doesn't define them, and we can shift that, we can reframe that.
It really touches to the safety that clients can feel in the held container and the work that we do with them, and how they can bring that sense of safety into their life outside of our space. Right? How can they call upon the safety that they felt in our sessions to be able to access some more work on their own, right? That they can continue to expand their ability to feel safe and comfortable in their body in the real world too.
Yes. And it's always so interesting. I do a lot of parts work in my practice, where we're actually really acknowledging the parts of ourselves that experienced that, and we had a bodily response to that trauma, but also presencing the strength, presencing our intuition, and being able to speak from that higher self and speak to those parts of ourselves. And that inner wisdom, yes, it's beautiful for us to get that external validation and to have supportive people in our world that can build us up, but it hits different when those beautiful insights and that beautiful encouragement is coming from different parts of ourselves, that wise part of ourselves, that strong part of ourselves. And much of this work is the client, by the end of the session, they'll have something that they can then anchor them outside of that session, whether that is a particular movement that they repeat, a gesture, a way that they hold themselves, an affirmation or a line that has come from their own self. Or even, a lot of my clients now joke that they've got so much art on their walls, because even though the process of art therapy isn't about creating art as such, but it is about seeing different ways that the body wants to express visually. But so many of them come out with beautiful pieces which are now symbols, and that visual represents, whether it was a safe space that they went to, or whether that was an insight that they want to be reminded of. They can then put that on their altar or put that near their bed and be reminded of that, because it has come from them. It's something beautiful that has come from their own subconscious, their own psyche, their own heart and body and mind. And that's why I think this work is so powerful, because it is cultivating that resilience from your own inner wisdom.
It's the true definition of an embodied practice, right? Is they're creating it from within. It's their art, it's their representation of the experience. And how empowering is it to be able to look at something and go, I was able to create that, right? Whether it's with drawing or clay or, painting or dancing or movement or what, it's all that within place. And so it feels like this full circle that it comes back to, right? Oh, right. It begins with me. It's grounded within me.
Yes.
And I just love that when thinking about doing, somatics and embodied work, is it really starts from the within.
Yes. It's so important. We've got all of these resources within, all this wisdom within.
Yeah. Totally. And Cathy, my, final question for you is, as we think about how, busy we all are in our lives and we're always on the go, what's one easy, brief, embodied kind of somatic practice that we can use if we don't have a lot of time to just connect inside, recultivate that connection with self? What's something that you would recommend?
Mm. Yes, time is of the essence, and we always feel like we don't have enough time for self-care and for self-check-ins. Something that I do with all of my clients and I encourage people to do, and it's one of the processes in my book. It's what I call an impulse stretch. So this is really, it's not about following a particular sequence. It's really about checking in the body at any given time. We can do this from our seated position if we're on our office chair, or we can do it standing up. We can do it first thing in the morning. We can do it throughout the day. We can do it before bed. And it's just following the impulses of the body, how the body initially wants to adjust, how it might want to stretch out and up and around, and just following our own intuitive, impulses from within of how we want to shake the body or move the body and connect with the body. It's really simple. You can do it to music or without music. And what I love about it is that we are presencing the body while we do it. We're letting the body move intuitively, how it wants to move. We're bringing in touch, we're bringing in stretch, and we're considering the whole self. So really like from head to feet, using the whole body to move and stretch out. But it can be done anywhere at any time. And I highly recommend that your listeners start to weave that into their daily life and just note the minor changes of what it's like to presence the body each day.
I love that. Thank you. I'm going to do a little stretch here as I kind of check in with what I need here. So thank you so much for joining me today, Cathy. It was really wonderful to talk to you, and take care.
Thanks for having me, Kira.
Please press the subscribe button, as well as rating and providing a review of our podcast. This helps others to connect with what you have been hearing. If you have any questions, please contact us at themindofatherapist@gmail.com. These questions will be kept anonymous. I want to thank Eric Price for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. Additionally, this podcast was created to provide accurate and authoritative information on the subject matter. Although we are interviewing licensed therapists, they are not your therapist. This podcast is not intended to serve as direct medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for direct professional help. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, guest, or PCS are rendering legal, medical, or clinical professional information. If you need a professional, we encourage you to find one. Visit Psychology Today to find a licensed clinician near you.